first panel discussion of the day takes us across the waters, Africa. Big up to Africa. Who's in the building from Africa? I'm like, I know if you're Nigerian, I expect way more than that, okay? Okay. West Indies in the building, Caribbean. Yes. I don't know because of slavery where I'm from, but I am like, hey, what can you do? I'm black. So shout out to the black people too, we just in here. Shout out to us. But we are going across the sea, across seas today. We're making waves with the international tech influencers who are making waves and creating opportunities all over the globe. Today's moderator is Terry Opong, the Chief Visionary Officer of Black Band. Terry provides strategic advice to emerging and breakthrough enterprises penetrating and operating in the African market, as well as serving as an advisor to startups, social impact organizations, and trade networks. So let's make some noise for Mr. Terry Opong. He will be joined by Nancy Duyon, an international research lead at Uber, where her daily quest is, hello, nice to meet you. Her daily quest is to increase the usability of products, applications, complex systems, and websites across different cultural ideals and cultural practices. So let's welcome out Ms. Nancy Duyon.
All right, can everyone hear me? Awesome.
Hey everyone. I know a lot of people here, so that's great.
I know, it's a lot of friends.
Yeah.
I've been in Ghana for 2 months, so it feels good to be back in the US, and I'll actually be there for 6 months as of Wednesday. So there's a lot today that we'll talk about. Nancy, funny enough, I was just at the Ghana Tech Summit. I know you spoke at the Haiti Tech Summit as well. And so let's just start off by really just to share with the crowd, what is your why, right? Why did you start doing what you do? I see you've been featured in ABC News, you've been featured in TechCrunch, you've been featured all these different publications, but how did you get started in your journey?
So just a little bit of background. My work is in helping tech companies spread their products in other cultural subsets, right? So that might mean different countries, that might mean different regions, and I've currently designed and helped implement changes in product design for at least 77 countries around the globe. I've also traveled to at least 70 countries.
77?
77 across the globe, yes.
So that's 77.
77. I'm trying to figure out if there's anyone else who's ever done this before, because I'm pretty confident I'm the #1 expert in this in the world.
See, listen,
but
I believe
we'll
her.
find out. I'm still doing research to find out who can top that. My start started with my parents coming to America on a visitation visa and deciding that they might like to stay, and so I was born. At that time, we lived in an illegal community. And so a lot of folks who know about how Caribbean people operate, Africans, we tend to stay very close-knit. And what that means is that we sometimes are ignorant to some of the things that are happening outside of that community. So my community couldn't answer a lot of questions for me.
Okay.
But I also noticed in the inner city, I was in Boston at the time, the schools there couldn't answer my questions either. They wouldn't tell me why the sky was blue. They couldn't tell me why, right? They're like, why do you need to know that? It's just blue. And well, I mean, in some cases, I don't know if you guys know this, in China, some of them have never seen blue skies because of the pollution. So they see the skies are gray. I had a ton of questions. My parents believe they're middle school educated farmers. And so they believed that my intelligence would come from the larger size of books. So the bigger the book, the smarter I would be, the harder the cover, the smarter I would be, the dustier the book, the smarter I would be. And so, I was reading encyclopedias, I was reading the Bible. If I could read the Quran, I would probably have thrown that at me. And was forced to read the dictionary as well because they couldn't answer a lot of my questions from, hey mom, I want to do gymnastics. And they're like, why can't you just tumble in the backyard? To, I'm 6 and they have now at this point made me read the Bible several times. And I'm like, this Mary person seems dope. What do I need to do to be a virgin? Right? Don't lie. My dad's like, go talk to your mother.
I have similar stories.
Right. So it was a lot of confusion growing up. And at some point, I felt like the community around me weren't trying to understand the things that were being fed to them. And I had questions about everything. And so the shorter end of my story is when I was 11, I decided, because context is an issue when you're in certain communities, to pack my stuff up and go. I'd been breaking all the fans in the house and taking the motors to try to build things, you know? And I had read this magazine, and on the back of the magazine it said, "Do you have questions?" And this is why I bring up context, because I had crap tons of questions. Now, by this time, when they ask you what you have questions about, this is where you submit letters in. I actually went under the turnstiles, if you guys remember when turnstiles were in existence, and took myself to the address of the magazine and tried to ask them all types of questions, to which they were like, "You can't be here unless you're 14. And I'm like, "I am 14. "Oh, for real? What's your birthday?" "Don't know." Can you imagine? At 11, I didn't know my birthday because my parents didn't understand the value of that, right? For me, it was one of those things that you needed for a passport, but you didn't need it. I mean, if it was your birthday, it was everybody's birthday. Everybody was going to celebrate, right? In a roundabout way, this magazine, and with my mother's help, ended up finding a way to get me into robotics at 11. And by 12, I was dropped off at MIT to learn a number of skills. And that's where I started my career, where people would actually answer some of my questions. So I learned robotics, I've learned 3D automation, music production. I know quite a bit about that, video production. And I learned how to code when I was 12.
Wow.
So by the time I was 16, I was teaching 2 computer science classes. By the time I was 18, I was instructing computer science, not just in museums and colleges, but I was also working as an application developer at MetLife. I was working as a cybersecurity person at Harvard. I was working at MIT. All of this before age 21, right? And so you can imagine, I'm thrilled getting all these questions answered, but I'm noticing a problem in these spaces that I'm in. Not only because I'm the only one, but because they're stating things and ways to learn things that I don't actually agree with. Like, you know, my first computer science class, I thought I was cheating because I didn't follow the same rules that they did. I remember the first time I studied, it was doing math, for example, in first grade. My parents had taught me the French model of subtraction, and the schools kept failing me because they didn't understand it because it wasn't done the American way, right? And so here I am trying to figure out, well, if I'm getting the right answers and I'm not doing it your way, does that mean I'm not qualified to do this? Does that mean I don't know what I'm doing? I'm getting the answer faster than you are, so what does that mean, right?
Yeah.
And so eventually, I took that interest to work on my master's. At that point, I had an information systems background, a computer science background, sociology background, and psychology background. Went and got my master's in human-computer interaction, went on to work on a PhD in human factors engineering, where I started to see holes in understanding of how culture applies to design, right? And the missing aspect of, okay, just because you think you know what's the best way to do it doesn't mean that's the only way to do it. And so there was this missing understanding that innovation only came from westernized societies. And that was completely ass backwards to me, coming from a farmland in Haiti. I was getting questions in my community here about, well, what makes you think you're an engineer? You don't have this many levels of skills and this and that. You know, people trying to put their own insecurities on you. And I said, well, you know, in Haiti, you don't have to have a degree to be an engineer. You don't have to have a degree to be a doctor. You don't have to have a degree to be a shaman, a mediator. There are lawyers in our community. There are artists in our community, and none of them have degrees. So are you telling me that I have to have a title based on your perspective in order for me to build a bridge when there are thousands of Haitians building bridges in Haiti without an engineering degree? Right, right. And so that's kind of where my confidence came from. And I was like, you know what? I'm tired of thinking that this is the only way. If I know loopholes to get into this faster, and I think that there's innovation in my difference, I'm going to bring that to the front. And that became what my career became about, was using my difference to scale products globally.
Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, can we clap for it, please? Wow. Listen, I think that's it for me, but no. So what I realized is, to your point, we all know a few people in this room, and it's about the community, right? And so one thing that, interesting enough, I was reading last year was about, specifically it was about Google and its retention issues, let's say that, with black engineers. So you stayed at Google for 3+ years?
Yeah, it was a little over, maybe around 4 years or something like that.
I think it's probably one of the longest tenures you've had in terms of employment?
Yes.
Okay. So explain what about Google made you stay as long as you did, if that's where we're reading they don't really do well with black employee retention?
So So I would say that I operate from a very different mindset of what these corporations are.
Okay.
I look at corporations as a college education that pays me to mess up as much as I want on
Repeat
their
that.
grounds
You look at
as a
corporations?
college education that pays me.
Okay.
I'm coming there to learn. I'm coming there to mess things up before I run off on my own and do it on my own. This is all practice, you know? So I don't see things the same way. So you'll notice I've hopped around in careers. I've now worked at Intel, Cisco, IBM, Google, and I contract in
Accenture.
It's Accenture as well, in a mobility group where I've worked across products from medical products at Baxter, working on mechanical kidneys, working all the way to Pfizer, their information site I designed and built. I mean, I've worked across every industry.
You built.
And designed their information site. If you guys don't know what that is, Pfizer must tell you guys the truth. All medical pharmaceutical companies must tell you the research they've done. And they have to do it without any ads. So, you know, for example, if Viagra got mixed with something and something bad happened, it has to be posted somewhere. So that's the medical information site space. And I mean, I've worked with Comcast and Time Warner Cable. I've worked across every industry, but I'm not looking at like Google as especially special compared to all these other companies. I felt like every company I went to gave me something that I needed. When I felt like they couldn't give me more, I had to take it to the next level, right? And so in the case of, for example, Intel, one of the things I noticed there, I had a great time there, but it was very quick that I noticed that people wanted to give me work that was suitable for me, right? And so I'm looking at them giving me things that are, you know, well, we don't want to take it easy on you, and they're giving the Asian kid near me something that he's beating sweats about. And so I'm at night working on redeveloping and building QA systems, but my job, according to them, is to write guides for interviews, just because they don't want me to be too overwhelmed, you know? And so at that point, it was kind of like, all right, where can I move where someone will give me more opportunity to take it to the next level, right? And so that was the progression of my career. Google was one amazing company to work for because it was a company that is so difficult to get into. It's more difficult to get into than MIT, than Harvard. And so it was the first company that I felt respected at, even though they still had their problems. It's the first place I went to where no one questioned my abilities. But to take a step back, I'm also a Google Scholar, and I also, I had won second place in engineering competition when I was working on my PhD. And the first job offer that I got was in human resources. And what I later found out was a lot of talented Black and brown people end up working in sales and human resources just because that's where they feel that you fit. Now, I was offended that how dare you? How are you gonna give me all this money towards engineering? And you clearly know I can do the work. And they stated to me that they felt like I would be more comfortable in a world of HR. And I mean, I got what they meant because I had been going through the struggle in these worlds of strangeness, you know? But I learned pretty quickly that if everyone around you is going to be strange, you might as well be yourself, because that's going to be strange too, you know? Learn very quickly. And so at Google, they helped me with my dreams to scale. But I think it was still very difficult for them to see past my my urge to not be seen as just a Black woman, but the best in industry. I'm not gonna just stick around for a Black enterprise if you're not offering me Forbes too. You know, I am one of the better people in this space, and I don't want to be pigeoned according to what you might believe. And so then I went off to Uber, where surprising to other people, but I wanted a different challenge. I wanted to get the brand of my work off of, well, Google's doing great things, to Nancy is the shit, right? So went over to Uber, and there was, you've heard of some controversies there, right? But people were really focused on my work. And that's where I've actually made systematic change, because of the fact that people know me for my work and not necessarily for what they believe I can do based on their own stereotypes or the images that they see, right? And so, I have worked with all of product. I have teams now in Brazil, India, and Mexico. I've trained and hired them myself, And so we've been able to literally show billions of dollars in savings based on systems that I've placed that have helped this company scale globally. And now this is something that I want to bring to other tech companies so they can recognize that not only can you scale your products, you can actually build for a better world. Because one of the things I try to teach everyone is there's a reason why you can give black people the worst parts of an animal and they can make it taste delicious, right? There's a reason why you can give black people things nothing and they can still be the most creative and innovative people in the world. These are the places that the people who have the least accessibility, the least versatility with our products, if you can design for them, you design for the world. You touch the world, because guess what? White America isn't the majority of the world, right? And I have to tell people at work that all the time. Our money is not just coming from America. This is a global landscape now. This is the next billion users. Yes, there is money in Africa. Yes, there is money in the Caribbean. This is not shocking. There are people there, and they want things to use, and they're willing to put the money out there. But if you're not keeping them in mind, then you're just building for your own community, and you're limiting your profitability. You're limiting your accessibility, right? And so I've been able to prove that, hey, maybe you might try to build products for just men, for example, but the truth of the matter is, who has most of the spending power in the household? So you guys know 65% is women in the household make the decisions. There's a reason why you throw some rose gold on something, right? It's get bought up real quick. And I'm not saying that's related to women, but it creates accessibility for all. When you think about women, when you think about black people, you're now opening up doors for other people to say, well, I like colors. I have struggles. I'm an elder. These are people who really do exist in this market that we're not paying attention to. I remember I went to an event a few weeks ago. Audacity is called, in Oakland. It's a black travel network, and there was all these millennials there who were so excited to work together and talk about all their travel experiences. And then there was a group of elders that were like, we got money. Why is no one building towards us, right? We want somebody to pay attention to us so we can, and that was interesting to me, because there are sources of income in the places that you may not realize they are, and they really do got money, So I'm trying to, and I've been successful at proving statistically that when you shift the design processes to focusing on people who are underrepresented, you actually build better products.
Interesting. Yeah. And so, well, shout out to you, because did you decide of Uber going to Ghana and Nigeria? Was that you, or?
A lot of this, luckily for me, I get to call a lot of shots in my career. And so that's no qualms. I do world. I do the world. I don't focus on just one.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because in Ghana, you pay with cash.
Yes.
Right. That was random to me as well, too, where literally when I use a card, the drivers cancel, right? Which is interesting, because over here, there isn't a cash option, right? So it's just interesting how, to your point of user experience, I've noticed, and I use that.
Let me tell you why that came to existence.
Thank you.
Because it's really super interesting. It was introduced at Uber that maybe we should consider cash, and people freaked out, right? They're like, oh my God, cash is gonna lead to murder, all types of things. But when you actually think about cash, I mean, this is like an American, certain perspective that we shouldn't bring cash into this market because it's gonna lead to more violence and problems. But the truth of the matter is, the majority of the world doesn't have 3-digit pins on the back of their credit cards, right? Those codes, they don't have that, right? So how are they surviving? Because they are paying for things, right? And there's a lot of different ways that people pay for things. In Brazil, you have boletos, for example. In India, they're using cash. There's a lot of opportunities to take in income. Even if you think about Bitcoin, you can use, right? That if you keep to your own mindset about what you feel works in your bubble, you're limiting, again, your profitability. And so it was decided that we were going to test it in a smaller market. And we decided to do this in India to prove that we believe that there was a lot of profit that could be made from cash if you removed your assumptions and turned those into questions, right? So we tested cash in India, and it was an overnight sensation. We could not believe the amount of money we were getting. And so I can't tell you the numbers, but just know that it impacted the entire global sphere of how Uber operates. It turned upside down this idea that America had the majority of money to now we're making quite a bit of money, and maybe more so than the States in India. So then the question was, what other countries would this be an opportunity to do? So like right now, we're actually looking at other opportunities to try to incorporate different ways of income to pay for the services so that it can be more accessible. So now you can see that cash is available in all these places, and what that turned into is this luxury service, because credit cards are still correlated with luxury, became something that now folks who are poor, folks who didn't have opportunities can now come along. Now, mind you, the cash thing, you can get real eager and take that switch, turn it on everywhere. the thing to know is that there are certain places, like when you think about like Thailand, or for example, where people don't actually just rob you, right? There are certain countries that that's not a true mindset. And there are some countries where that might be true. So it's important to know that one size may not fit for all, but you gotta figure out what the heuristics are around that space. So right now, for example, I'm writing guidelines for Latin America, right? For how to design in Latin America. But you know what? Brazil's very different from the rest of Latin America. So now we gotta figure out, do we need to make Brazil guidelines? Is there certain things that correlate with all of them? I'll give you a great example. We were working on a trip planner at Uber, and they want to help drivers basically plan their days better. We studied in America what made their lives easier, and what the response was we want to know about weather, and we want to know about peak times, like for traffic. We asked the same questions in Brazil and Mexico, and Brazil and Mexico said, why do we need to know about like peak hours? There's always traffic, right? There's always traffic, or we know where it is. And what do we need to know about the weather? We look up and see the clouds moving. We know it's going to rain. And it's really funny to me because, I mean, coming from Haiti, we didn't have to keep checking the weather apps. So we didn't have that, right? We knew what the weather was going to be. But what they said, what was more important to them is, we want to know about events. But here's what's interesting. In Brazil, they said, we want to know about events because we figured if we can find out what the Poppin events are, we can pick them up and take them further out, right? In Mexico, they were like, nah, right? We want to know about the events so we can stay away. That's burning more gas. That's causing more trouble. We stuck in traffic. Now I'm annoyed. The riders annoyed. They blaming me for all types of stuff. I didn't want to be there with them all. I want to explore new areas. And so the question is, do you build an app now that works with everyone? Or do you build an app that's different? In this particular case, the solution is, wait a minute, that's kind of a great idea. Maybe Americans would like to know the same thing about, hey, maybe certain events that you might get stuck in traffic might lose you more gas if you're driving a certain car or not, right? Right? And so even like we learned statistically, well, in South Africa, we learned that there are certain cars that are more dangerous to drive. The Volkswagen is a more dangerous car. It's higher likeliness that you'll be robbed or hijacked in a Volkswagen than any other vehicle. If we have that information and we could share that out to folks, how does that change the atmosphere? So right now, one of the questions that I'm trying to figure out and try to answer, just kind of from a global standpoint for any tech company, is where can you start to personalize things, and when can you start to make something from a global first perspective and not, like I said, an American first perspective?
That's interesting. And funny story before we transition. I was in Ghana for 2 months, and one time I was taking an Uber, and the driver accepted the ride. I had my card, so I thought this is perfect, right? And then he calls me, and I have my American number. I hadn't switched to the local SIM card, which is something you may want to do if you travel internationally. And so then I call him, and he tells me, listen, I don't have any gas, so can you please cancel the ride, all right? And I laughed about it since I was already late to where I was heading to. However, to your point, I realized that in certain countries, you just have to just go with the flow, right? So I could have, reported him and done all these things, but then put yourself in his shoes, right? He didn't have gas money. Who am I to negate him for that, experience? And so now, you mentioned globally. I see you've done the Haiti Tech Summit. Kudos to you on that. And I see that also you're on the board for the Impact Hub Africa, right? So would you care to explain how those two things happened?
Sure. It's interesting. I've always, when you get to travel, you get to meet such great people. And I've always had international experiences in different schools. I mean, so I'm one of those people that, even if I'm in an engineering department, I'm not just hanging out with engineers. That's probably why I'm so personable. You know what I mean? I'm going to other places and trying to network with a lot of different people. I'm especially trying to connect with some of these international people in different places. And so in this particular case, a person who I went to undergrad with, who is from Mali, asked me if I could sit on the impact hubs across all of Africa. He said his goal was to open up 8 impact hubs a year and wanted to know if I could participate in some way. And of course, it's like, absolutely.
Let me actually pause you, Sarah.
Right.
So Impact Hub is WeWork. Think of WeWork, right? So co-working space.
It's a co-working space.
It's a co-working space, and so they have branches globally, and in Africa, they're really doing very well. They've had 2 heads of state come visit the Impact Hub in Accra, Angela Merkel and the French Prime Minister. So they visited while I was in Ghana as well.
And you'll probably notice that the design of these spaces are also more culturally appropriate. Like when I think about having impact hubs over Africa, my research nerd gets excited because now I have a resource and a place to go to actually study and try to develop people and for people and also talk to locals all in one place. You were talking about the experience you had with Ghana and being very compassionate about the person's situation. A lot of our app design looks at that compassion. So for example, in Nigeria, the way our application works, not every Nigerian has a car available to them to get on the Uber platform, right? But there are Nigerians that have fleets of vehicles just sitting waiting for people to drive. And so we have an actual partnership opportunity where people who don't have a car can actually get into a partner's car. And we literally have partner date nights where people, because trust is a big issue in the African and Caribbean communities, so they get to sit down, look you up and down, and see if they can just hand you their car. But that has been what's been operating pretty well in Nigeria. But in order for us to get these insights, we need local people. So one of the things about the way I even hire, for example, when I was hiring in Brazil, when I was hiring in Mexico, a lot of my local people were like, Nancy, I want to go back to Brazil and I want to help. And I said, in Haiti, we have this rule that you can't be president if you haven't been in the country for at least 5 years. So that's what kind of happened with Wyclef, right? Right? Because they want to know that you believe in this country enough to stay there and make a difference and do things. And that's the same policy I do with my hiring, right? I'm sure there are very, very great candidates around the world, but you all know who knows their land even better? The people who live there, right? And so hiring people, and I have unconventional ways of hiring because UX, UI, those kind of roles aren't available everywhere in the world, right? So I look for roles that have a lot of empathy, such as journalism, such as video production, things that really take care into how other people's live their lives and not about, what, I lived in America for 10 years, all we gotta do is apply American things to these countries and they'll be great. That's not the correct mindset. I remember after the Haitian earthquake, I was there a day before the Haitian earthquake. My parents were in Haiti. My parents live in Haiti. The majority of my family lives in Haiti. Still live on a farm in Haiti, right? They got caught up in the earthquake, and I remember as I was waiting to figure out what was going on, these engineers told me they had gone down to Haiti and taught Haitians sustainable design. And they were so confident. They said, we took 5 days out of our time and we taught them. And I'm like, you're bugging, right? How in the world could you teach Haitian sustainable design if you're not fully aware of their own culture? So I'll give you an example. I went to India, and when I first got there, I asked permission because I didn't want to be culturally appropriate. Can I wear a sari? Because people were rocking them all over the place, right, in the streets. And somebody said to me, yeah, it's absolutely fine. We don't take that as offense. In fact, that's beautiful. And, depending on who you speak to, that might be true or not. But, I'm younger. I go into the shop. I can't speak the local language. The guy's showing me all these materials and stuff. And I notice he's showing me material that doesn't seem to be quite lovely as I would like. So I'm repeating over and over again, Beyonce, because we can't speak the same language, but I figure he understands I want that Beyonce level. Sorry, you know what I'm saying? I want to look like Beyonce at the end of this. So that's the only word I'm using to leverage. I'm like, level up, you know what I'm saying? No, Beyonce, more Beyonce, all right? And so we eventually get something, I'm like, yes, Beyonce, this is it, right? Takes 2 days, he makes this thing, and I'm in the streets rocking this. Everyone is staring at me because I know I look good. I just look great, right? I'm in the marketplace, I'm buying fruits and things like that, and my friend runs up to me and says, Nancy, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm clearly representing in the most beautiful way while buying fruit. And she says, you're wearing a wedding dress. I had no clue that red and gold were colors that represented wedding colors. I don't know if you know, in India as well, white is a color that they wear at funerals. If you don't understand these cultural nuances, you're gonna lie flat on your face. You don't tell me you're gonna build roundabouts in Haiti. If you don't know how Haitians operate and how they see those things, you basically set up a village for them to sell fruits, right?
Yeah.
You have to understand right? You know? And you might have to put a cultural figure in the middle, but if you don't understand these people, you can't just show up with all your nobility and say you know what's best for people. Definitely. And this is where I believe in design, empathy doesn't go far enough. I think people think they're empathizing with people, but what they're actually doing is they're creating this, they're living in a world of self-serving bias, right? For example, when I was going through that, my mother was missing for 6 days in Haiti, my father was missing for 2 weeks. People were calling me constantly, I need to do something. We know you don't know where they are, right? But in the meanwhile, I have all this clothes, I want to send it to Haiti. I didn't know why folks didn't just look at the news to see if there are earthquakes and floods, where are they gonna put the clothes, right? What you're doing is you're trying to make yourself feel better, but I can't tell you that because then I look like a monster, right? But that is what the world is operating in. They're trying to soothe themselves. I call this a nobility complex. It's a new term I've introduced into the field of UX.
Repeat
And it's,
that.
again,
It's a what?
nobility complex. I've just started teaching it across Silicon Valley that if you are not aware of your own self-serving bias, you may not recognize that you're building something to cheer yourself up, to pat yourself on the back, but not because you're actually trying to help people, right? And I want people to recognize the differences between that, right? So, and that requires, you know, not assuming that you know everything, right? And that can be hard, but this is why the greatness about this work is I wanted to work in a field, I wanted to use my engineering abilities to teach love, compassion, and empathy from a perspective that was actually useful. And again, you know, you gotta throw the profitable word down there because that's really important to them. And when I was working on my PhD, that was something that they taught me at University of Michigan that was very important, that, you know, to bring humanities into engineering is going to be, or business is gonna be hard if you can't also communicate that language back to people to say, this is gonna make you money, right? And I'm saying that you can make the world a better place and make money and create scale if you take a step back and question even yourself, right? And it starts with you. It starts with you questioning yourself. I mean, we see this time and time again in the news, people who don't question themselves and they're quick to defense, right? Quick to defend, and they're not doing anything better. We know what I'm talking about, right? And that doesn't help anything. You know, I talk about the perspective of power, the perspective of privilege, and what role that plays. And to truly be an ally, it will mean that you're not just going to talk about, like, I think women should be paid fairly. It's about what are you doing about it, right? What are you doing? How are you leveraging your privilege to lift another person up, to give somebody else an opportunity, to be a spokesperson in this capacity, to bring a different perspective and creativity to what you're doing. And so if I have to keep telling stories about, hey, aren't you a little shocked that my parents came from the farmlands and I'm just right behind you? Don't you think that's a little scary? You know what I mean? That would scare me, but that means I have something to offer beyond the limitations of your mind. Leverage that. But don't try to tell me I'm lucky to be here. You're very lucky to have me as far as I'm concerned.
Now listen, thank you so much. I think we have some time for some questions. So what we're gonna do is, if you don't crowd the middle, please just line up on the sides, and then we'll take questions in rapid succession. Again, keyword questions, all right? You know, we can save the comments for the happy hour, all right?
I'll save the comments for the happy hour. I'm Yvonne Bry with Global Trade Compliance at a tech startup, so I deal with some of the nuances you deal with. In light of the current political state and the impact on global policy, can you speak to, or how does it impact your ability to grow the company, or do you have animosity, not you, but do people have animosity against you, animus, as you try to reach out and grow a U.S. company internationally?
So, you know, one of the things thank you for your question. It is extremely important to understand policy behind a lot of the work I do. So, for example, when I'm developing products in Ethiopia, the politics matter very, very much so. Understanding how monopolies work matter. Understanding if a country is at war matters, right? And so one of the things I teach my team is to approach this as if you have seen somebody with an ugly baby, right? You're not going to tell them the baby is ugly, right? You're not. You're going to find a way to tell them, right, in their language, that maybe there are some things you can do to to make this a little bit of a better situation. And so and there's ways to do that, right? And so what I'm saying is that I deal with engineers a lot that really do feel like I am building and I'm launching quickly and I'm doing everything I'm doing, and you're coming back with all this information and you're telling me to an extent that I'm doing it wrong, or that there's something wrong with my idea, or that, you know, and that's not what I'm doing. And so what we've learned is how to speak with a little honey, right, in it. And so, for example, I talked about the trip planner situation. If I went back to the engineers and said, yeah, everyone's laughing at you across the world because you guys think that peak hours and weather is the only thing that matters because you guys don't know how to read past your app, that ain't gonna help nobody with nothing, right? But what I can do is say, wow, what you've done is amazing. What if we brought in some other opportunities and thought about taking what you have and elevating it to this, right? Yes, I think the weather is cool, but what if we looked at the weather and events and made this a more robust app, still kind of giving them some credit and not telling them that, you know, your child is ugly, but saying, wow, you know what? I know this is a bad example because I don't really know how to make a child that's ugly look, right? But the point is, I'm sure you won't say that, right? And so that's one of those things that I try to communicate to my team that, you know, especially from an international perspective, you're gonna be hearing some things from America, from these westernized societies that you're gonna be like, say what? Why would they, what do you mean that they think people are gonna be mass murdered because of, you know, bringing cash in? Well, you can't come back and tell them that. What you do is you talk to them in their language. Well, we think there's an opportunity to make a 30% increase across all markets if we are to introduce this, and we'd like to test this in a small market first and then compare it across the globe. That is how you kind of get their attention. And so I've learned to speak multiple languages to make sure that my point gets across.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Hi, how are you? Thank you so much for your time today. My name is Ashley Kirkwood. I'm the founder of Mobile General Counsel, the firm for startup entrepreneurs and influencers. And my question to you is, one, what would you charge us to do in the audience to challenge our own biases as African Americans and as members of the African diaspora? And then two, can you tell us about a time that you flipped a person who didn't buy into your theory that empathy matters for productivity, and how you've been able to have that difficult conversation and change it?
All right. I might have you repeat the second question because I can only hold so many questions in my head. But I think the first question you were asking is, can you repeat that first one again?
Yes. How would you challenge us to look inward and challenge our own biases, even though we are minorities?
So I am an extremely large component of being responsible for your energy and your own healing. Big proponent for it, right? And I really do believe when you take responsibility of taking care of yourself, and being more compassionate toward yourself, you can see the word more compassionately. A lot of times when people are kind of mad at you or arguing with you about something, what they're really telling you is something that they are judging within themselves. And I'm very much aware, thank God for psychology and sociology backgrounds, right? For this perspective. I really strongly advise that, you know, one, we stop trying to validate ourselves through these external things. We are valuable already, right? Even if we're sitting in front of a TV doing nothing, you are put on this earth, you are of value. And I think it starts there because one of the things I've noticed working in the tech industry, I've been very fortunate to be in so many places, but there are people who will take the job, right? If Google offers them to do HR, even though they have a marketing background, right? And it's because they need someone to see them, they need to be recognized, they need to be validated. The truth of the matter is, it's probably much faster for you to take a job someplace else and get the skills needed and then move to Google with that, right? Than to just take the job because you feel like this might be the only chance that you have. And so that requires a lot of affirmation work. Requires a lot of looking in. I mean, I have a therapist, I'm comfortable with that, right? I have a black woman, Caribbean therapist too on top of that, and you'd be surprised, a Caribbean woman with a mindset of, you know, as a black woman, you don't have to be so strong about everything, right? And so I think that's what I would suggest first, is actually making sure you do the work to take care of yourself, right? And you'll see the signs. I was telling a friend that, you know, you'll start to feel the growing pains, right? And you might start to act out, but those are growing pains, that anxiety, that depression, all of that. That's supposed to be something that reminds you, it's an alert for you to shift something in your life. And so that's that part, right? Then you said the second question was about how to deal with these difficult clients.
I'm going to speak my time because I know there's a line of people and I want to be respectful. But I thank you so much for that answer. Thank you for being here. You were wonderful. Both of you, my brother, great job, and many blessings to you in the future.
Thank you.
And we'll see you in Ghana next year, right?
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Come on, I come with invites. You give me an invite, I'm
Yes. You guys really should go to Ghana. It's
HR
amazing.
1242.
And just a ton of Americans in Ghana. A ton of
Is it
Americans that
entire
live in Ghana.
We'll talk about that offline.
Yes.
That's the question.
All right, good morning. Nancy IET, sak passe. Yes, I'm so.
Or not boule, because people get upset when I don't respond that way.
I just want to say I'm so incredibly proud of you. Being an immigrant from Haiti, I was born in Gaumont. So to be here, to have this opportunity in the States, you know what that's like, and I know what that's like, connecting with you, and you making such an impact is is such a motivation for me. My name is Joe Mcnally. I am an author. I wrote this book, The Hero in the Helmet, Colin Kaepernick. So I'm a therapist by day and an author by night. And I know you know that multicultural competencies is becoming very, very popular in psychology. So I took that and put it in a book as well, for children, for people around the world, knowing that there's more to what's going on than what we see in America. So my question to you is, how do I get this book to go global? Because that's my goal, right? I need this in Haiti, in Creole. I need this in Africa, in all the dialects. Like, what could you share with me? What advice do you have for me?
So here's the beautiful thing about being at a conference called Black Enterprise, right? It's not just focused on tech, but it's focused on the business aspect of this. And the one thing people aren't fully taking advantage of is the thing that's making us money, ads, right? You got to get on Facebook. You got to get on Instagram. You got to post things there. And you know, one of the people I would leverage, I'd say, reach out to or try to get some information from. His name is Jabril Agora. Have you ever heard of this person?
No.
He is a beast with it in the marketing world. People think that he is a person who just travels the world living his best life, but he makes his money helping others put their products in ads. And so this is an opportunity, I think, to go global using the technologies that already exist at very, very low cost to you, right? And so you can literally look on these ads and say, I want this targeting people from ages 12 to 17 of African descent who have natural hair, right? You can, I mean, they have that level of detail on Facebook and Instagram, and so I would say use the technologies that exist. And then on the flip side, for those of you who love to travel like I do, I end up in these countries. I've taught at University of Lagos. I've taught in schools all over South Africa, Ghana, everywhere. What I normally do is I do what I call the like underground railroad route of reach. And so what that means is I go to the churches, and I speak to the folks. I say, listen, I know you don't want to watch these kids, right? Give them to me for 3 hours, and I'm going to teach them how to do code through dance, right? Or I'll go to some resources or influencers around Nigeria or Mozambique and say, hey, if there's a space that will have me, I will give you my first talk for free, just so you can hear about the products that I'm working with, and we can figure out how to partner later. And people will give you the space. It's really exciting to people around the world to hear from people outside of their countries, right? Especially drop the American card. I'm not even kidding about that. I went to Afropunk in South Africa, and my American friends were there selling things. My friend brought his own tailor. It started raining, and they're literally sewing hoods onto vests and selling out of it, all because really there was this American flair that if it's American, there must be something
specific.
to it. Yes.
Black American.
Black American. There's value in that if you didn't know, right? So, you know, don't be afraid to get on these planes and try, you know, do some market research and try things out. But you can use your community to spread the word. That's why I call it Underground Railroad, right? Put that out there, and believe me, I spoke at the White House, for example, during Obama's administration. Gotta break, turn it up. Yes. A couple years ago, and I kid you not, there was a video made by one individual from the Voice of Haiti, and it is some insane thing. Overnight, I became a celebrity in Haiti. Because the video, it was a short clip, I was speaking broken Creole, and the Haitians just kept sending it through WhatsApp to everybody over and over. By the time I got to the airport, women were coming up to me like, is this you? This grainy picture of me. They're like, oh, no, VIP, come, right? So use your outlets and have your people spread the word for you.
Definitely. The last thing I'll say is, so we probably know a guy named Everett Taylor. So Everett was in Ghana in May. I was put in touch with him about 3 days before, and he ends up getting a speaking engagement because my friend of mine was having an event, Everett Taylor's in Ghana, and it was a Global Shaper event, right? And that went viral, like Everett Taylor's in Ghana. So I'd say, to your point, just reach out to your connections and use LinkedIn.
Awesome.
Thank you.
I'd love to connect with you both.
I'm on LinkedIn, add me.
Hi everyone. My name is Brittany Thomas. I am founder of Happily Better After. I wanted to ask you a question and just get your perspective. I'm hearing you talk about the different organizations you've worked for, and it just makes me wonder about reforming spaces versus creating your own space as entrepreneurs. So with the brilliance that you have, you easily could thrive in your own space, in your own endeavors, but you choose to work with organizations like Uber, like Google. And I think that challenges my perspective as a person who recently left their 9 to 5. So I've been in the higher ed sector, and I wanted to just ask you, again, about reforming spaces versus creating spaces, but also particularly about higher education as a person who has their doctorate. What would you say about even this age of student who's challenging and questioning the value of higher education, given all of the different alternative avenues creatively that they can explore and still thrive, coming to conferences like this, and just wanting to be in their respective space, and also about reforming versus creating spaces?
So I'm going to give you my own unique perspectives. It's just my opinion. A lot of what I know, I taught myself. That I'm a person who likes to learn on my own. I like to read, study, search things, scour the internet and things like that. I learned very early on that I didn't need to wait on somebody to feed me, if that makes sense, that I could feed myself in that capacity. And so I'm of a believer that if you're a person who needs someone else to be there with you to learn, that is an option. But if you go, for example, to my Medium articles, I have cheat sheets for this. You don't have to go to college to figure this out, right? You really don't. This industry relies on experience more than education, per se. But if you have both, it's lovely. I chose to continue going to school because I found a niche. I found an opportunity that I wanted to test out in different companies, right? And so I saw there was a missing gap. I'm sitting in these programs and they're telling me, for example, human factors engineering was what I was working on with my PhD. They're saying things like, bars dim their lights at night because when light is taken away from your eyes, your hearing increases, which is why when you're in daylight, you might be shouting across from each other, but at night, you can hear the person. This intimacy feeling that you have is actually your ears actually being better able to hear the person across from you. I'm hearing that you're designing casinos, you're painting the walls red because they keep you alert. You're lowering ceilings on blackjack tables because they create a space that makes you stay there longer. The most addictive machines are by the doors and exits. I'm hearing the way they design libraries are such that they echo, rooms that echo, because when you hear yourself speak, in a library or a museum, you become self-conscious. And I heard all those things and I said, but what if you were Haitian and walked into that room, right? Right, is that true? Because I feel like if a Haitian heard an echo, they'd be like, oh, right? Right, and so I found a niche, and so for me, I love research. I am a researcher, and so education made sense for me to continue in on. I do want to also address the point that I am working across these industries, and it's kind of interesting, right? Because I'm fully capable of having my own. It's important to know that I do. I do have my own consulting practice. I've worked with tech companies that want to hire me to allow me some control of my own intellectual property, which has been an interesting stretch because, you know, I'm at the University of Michigan and I'm finding out, okay, I won second place in an engineering competition, but I don't own my own intellectual property. I have to buy the rights back, right? I'm learning that the same thing is true if I go to IBM, that even if I made a new broom, IBM, who has the most patents of any company in the world, it's because they take everything that you got, right? Learning at Google, they specifically take certain portions. And so I now know how to negotiate in my contracts. Nah, I'm taking this, you can have that. I'm in this world, you can have that, right? So it made sense, for example, for me to leave a Google that would take a lot of my competencies and go to a place like Uber, because Uber doesn't want me to do ride sharing, but that's not my interest, right? So I can work on other projects and work on different things. And the other thing to remember is I consider these companies education, right? I'm sitting in these spaces and, you know, folks are saying, hey, tell me what your 5-year plan is. And I'm like, that's difficult because I'm not going to be here. Not going to be here, right? And so I'm quite literally leveraging the credibility, leveraging all these opportunities so then I can then say with my own company, which I do plan to have, right? That I don't know if you've ever met anybody who's designed for this many countries, worked with this many companies, done this many things, knows their atmosphere, their ecosystem, their culture backwards and forwards. You have no choice but to work with me. So I'm playing the long game, right? This is chess to me, right? So I don't want to discourage people, but yes.
Yeah, so listen, anyone that has any questions,
Okay.
definitely, we will see you after the panel. Break. We hope
Thank
you
you.
enjoyed this time. Thank you.